In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Lord, graciously give us your Holy Spirit, and guide us from within. Incline our will toward yours, and enkindle our heart with the fire of your Holy Spirit. We ask you this through the powerful intercession of Our Lady, who is always present among us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and in the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to this video number 44 of Reading and Studying St. John of the Cross, Book 2, Dark Night. And we are in chapter 9, about to start chapter 19 in the Book 2 of the Dark Night of it's Dark Night of the Spirit. So without further ado, let me share with you the portion of screen. Here it is. Let me just mute. Yeah. So we left it just here. I think I did comment this one, and we are supposed to start here. Chapter 19. It begins, or he begins, St. John of the Cross, to explain the 10 steps of the mystic ladder of divine love, according to Saint Bernard and Saint Thomas. Thomas being here, Thomas Aquinas, of course. The first 5 are here treated, and the next 5 are treated in chapter 20. Before starting this, I think it's important to remember a sort of a double-edged sword. In any book or any author who would offer us the description of stages of growth, we need to be careful, not careful of what the author is saying, but how we receive what the author is saying. Many authors talked about the journey, the stages of the journey from John Climacus, I think, it's pronounced properly, I don't know, who is a spiritual master in the early centuries, probably 5th century, if I'm not wrong. You have Saint Bonaventura, for instance, in the Middle Ages, Franciscan, who talks about the journey of the soul toward God, and plenty of other authors in the Middle Ages, in the medieval time. And of course, you have Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, and many others. They all have one or more way of presenting the steps or stages of growth in spiritual life. So it's not only one author. It's not, for instance, Teresa of Avila, who presented to us the interior castle, even though the interior castle is extremely known today and spread. You just mention it, people, you say, yeah, I know, or yeah, I heard about it, or I read something about it, and so forth. But it's plenty of other authors. So more known, less known, and spread over the 2,000 years. Even the Gospels themselves, whoever watched the course on St. John and spiritual life will see how the 6 signs presented in the Gospel of St. John are in fact stages of growth which are supposed to lead us to the seventh sign, which is Jesus on the cross, the manifestation of the glory of God, and so forth. People who follow the course will understand what I'm talking about. So now, when we are faced with such teaching, the temptation is, temptation, quote unquote, if you want, or our inclination, our first reaction is to sort of try to understand the stages, the steps, but also instinctively to try to feel, where are we, where am I on the journey? I forgot to mention also the 12 degrees of humility, if I'm not wrong, St. Benedict, St. Bernard also, and so forth. So you have plenty of degrees of this, degrees of that, of growth, of charity, and so forth. So the temptation is to sort of try to, in a hasty way, try to see, where am I on the journey? This is one point. A second point is, if you read it rapidly, you might not notice the differences between the stages. As I said in previous lessons, we have the temptation of thinking that, yeah, we can move from one stage and go back and then forth, back and forth, and so forth. Yes, Teresa of Avila says, if you are not careful, you will go backward. And we understand that. That's absolutely clear. But still, some would think that, yes, you can go forward and backward. This is one point. Another point, as I said, you cannot really distinguish one stage from the other. You will see it here right now. We will be seeing in this chapter 5 steps of this ladder of growth in love. And maybe sometimes you will say, but this fourth is like the fifth, where is the difference? Or the third is like the fourth, what is the difference? You see? It could look also in your eyes a little bit artificial. Remember also that St. John of the Cross is inspired by St. Bernard and St. Thomas, and he's adding a little bit of his. So it's a mix of the three, if you want. So you need to bear all this in mind, and not, why I'm saying all this, in order not to be too, I would say, too fussy, too like, I want to have precision, clarity, and absolutely be sure, am I here or am I there? Can I recognize this? Can I recognize that? And remember also that we don't always have a proper understanding of ourselves, which is normal to a certain extent. Remember also what I said in the video on the use of this course. I put it at the beginning of each, at the second lesson of each of the playlists of the first book, the other first book, second book, and this book. So I said you need not to rush into conclusions, and remember that you have something called spiritual direction. Of course, bearing in mind, if you, I mean, considering or hoping that you have a good spiritual director, but still, forgive me for the expression, we don't play that game of trying to know exactly where we are. So you will ask me, well, what's the purpose then of John of the Cross mentioning to us 10 degrees of love, of growth of love? Well, we learn different forms of intensity, of growth, of transformation, of purification. Some of them are very clear in his mind, but they might not be as clear for us as they are in his mind. You will see at certain moments he will be talking about certain stages. I will show you the parallel in other works. Other moments, you won't necessarily see the differences. Okay, so please, all this to say, be careful what you might be doing with these 10 degrees of love. Don't play with that. Just listen to it humbly, whatever is the Lord is telling you through this or that stage, learn from it. There is no harm from that. There is no harm about learning about further stages, because they increase your desire and your hope to reach these levels, because they are given. God wants to give us the fullness of love. Don't ever remove this from your mind and your hope. God wants to give each one of us the fullness of his love. It requires faith, it requires hope, it requires exercising love and so forth. But still, it's very important to keep that. So it is useful also to learn about further stages. Why? Because it increases the fire of your desire, the thirst to be there, you see? So everything is useful, but be careful how you use it, okay? Sorry for this long introduction or warning, but I think it's important. Now, let us start. We observe then that the steps of this ladder of love by which the soul mounts one by one to God are 10. Okay, we will not, how can I put it? You say, yes, but I read it in another author. There are not 10, there are 9, there are 7, there are 8, there are 5, there are 3. Just follow, go with the flow. Because yes, if you consider certain aspects, there are less. If you consider other aspects, there are more. So just be a little bit flexible, okay? Now, this is me between square parentheses who put the beginning of this new contemplation. Remember, in this entire book is about a new way, a new intervention of God in our life, where he lifts us from our base manner of knowing him and loving him to a divine, mysterious, unknown, new manner. Okay. Now, this intervention is a purer, a more proper form of contemplation. We already talked about this. I don't want to go back again. So it's interesting that he starts with this contemplation here. You would expect him to say, okay, there are other stages before, there are other forms of love before, and you would feel a bit upset by saying, why are you not mentioning all what the soul went through before that stage? You see, so this is why I say a bit of flexibility is important. The first step of love causes the soul to languish, and this to its advantage. To be ill, to be wounded or ill by this love. But this is a good wound, a good illness. I don't know if do you have this in English language? Like we say in French, malade d'amour. Do you have something along these lines? How do you say it? Illness of love? No.
In more literary forms, it's used, they use the word languish. I can't think of one in a more modern one. But in books, they would say languish. Weak from love, I suppose, weak from love.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure of the modern one.
Okay, because in Spanish it's enfermar. Enfermar, enfermedad is illness. In French, you would have the same, no? Maladie, maladie d'amour.
Then it's weak from love.
Illness of love.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
you not say lovesick?
Lovesick, yeah, that's it.
Lovesick?
Thanks, yes, lovesick.
Okay, thank you. Good. So, in Spanish is rather this, ¿no? El primer grado de amor hace enfermar al alma provechosamente. It makes the soul be lovesick to its advantage. The bride, and it's very interesting here, he calls her already the bride, while in fact it's the bride to be. She's not yet the bride. The bride means there is at least engagement or certainly better union. No, we're not there yet, and still he calls her the bride, which is the bride to be. The bride is speaking from this step of love when she says, I adjure you I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. This is from the Song of Songs of Solomon. Daughters of Jerusalem, that if ye find my beloved, ye tell him that I am sick with love. Here it is, sick with love. This sickness, however, is not unto death, which means it will not lead to death. This is a quote, by the way, from St. John chapter 11. It's not mentioned neither in English nor in the Spanish. It's when the Lord talks to Martha when Lazarus is ill and he will die. He's not dead yet. He says this sickness is not for death. It will not lead to death. Not real death, at least. I hope I'm not wrong in this quote. But for the glory of God. John 11. For in this sickness the soul swoons as to sin and as to all things that are not God. Swoons, weakens or leaves out. For in this sickness the soul swoons as to sin and as to all things that are not God, for the sake of God himself. So this illness, if you want, this being wounded by Jesus' love, in fact, makes us leave everything for God himself. Even as David testifies in the Psalms, saying, my soul hath swooned away. That is, with respect to all things for thy salvation. So I leave out, I drop, in Spanish is desfalleció mi alma, which means for everything that is not God. So you see how he reads the scripture. The Psalms are the food of in the divine office, and you see how he enters in the Psalms, how he's led to understand he reads the Psalms in a certain way. It's not only a Christian way, not only in Christ, but very deep in Christ. That is with respect to all things for thy salvation. For just as a sick man first of all loses his appetite and taste for all food. This is to swoon, no? His explanation of swoon. In the beginning, we lose appetite and taste for all food. Why? Because we are sick, we are ill. And his color, the skin color, changes. So likewise, in this degree of love, the soul loses its taste and desire for all things that are not God, all creatures. So as you remember, I did mention before, the palate changes. The Holy Spirit starts to work in a new way, in a more powerful way. So obviously, we are not attracted to the same things as before. Where our desire goes toward God, so all the rest becomes tasteless. And changes its color and the other accidentals of its past life, like love, one in love. When you are in love, you are in a completely different state. We see this in the movies or in the novels we read. The person is completely like cut from the rest of the world. You are in such a mode that, well, it's called falling in love, no? Falling in love. You lose probably your normal bearings, and you are taken by this passion of love, and you're not aware of what is happening. You are not paying attention to the advice given to you. This is why we say love is blind, no? And you go for it. So he says it's a little bit like this, but for God, and the creatures are left out. The soul falls not into this sickness if excess of heat be not communicated to it from above. So you see, excess of heat means God's communicating himself, this new contemplation. We are not aware of it, but it is communicated to us. But we can see the effect. You see, you don't necessarily perceive directly the action of God, but you see the effect. You see that you are changing. You are not attracted anymore by the same things you were attracted before. And here it is much more radical because it's God and the rest is no. Even as is expressed in that verse of David, which he says, pluviam voluntariam segregabis Deus hereditari tue et infirmata est. The sickness and swooning to all things, which is the beginning and the first step on the road to God. It's interesting here. He considers this advanced stage as a first step to God. Okay? Just give me a second. So sorry for this interruption. The sickness and swooning to all things, which is the beginning and the first step on the road to God, we clearly described above when we were speaking of the annihilation wherein the soul finds itself when it begins to climb this ladder of contemplative purgation. You see, it's the beginning of climbing, while in fact we did have graces received before. Remember the milk, all the consolations that sometimes or very often he can give to people, not everybody, but many people. So now the idea here is the first step. It's not the first step, but for him it's the first step of this new love given to us by God. When it can find no pleasure, support, consolation, or abiding place in anything soever. Shocking, no? Because this stage, I mean, many people don't have the experience of this stage for many reasons. So when you say, yes, St. John of the Cross is talking about 10 stages of love, of growth, let us see, let us read, and then you copy it and paste it and distribute it to others and so forth. What are we doing here? The first step on this ladder is completely of another world already. So all the journey prior to that stage, that new, this new intervention of God will be missing. And it is very important because if you don't have the previous stages, you cannot have this one. You see, the person is not ready to have this new intervention of God because of all the different acts that the person was supposed to produce. You see what I'm trying to say? So this is why I'm saying one has to be very careful not to take these 10 steps and then apply them the way they want. It's very delicate, and it's here, as you can see, it's very advanced. So when he says here, this ladder of contemplative purgation, dark night of the spirit, not dark night of the sense, when it can find no pleasure, support, consolation, or abiding place in anything soever. Wherefore, from this step, it begins at once to climb to the second. So all that which brought the soul to this stage is put almost in one step, and then now we are starting the new step, which is what will happen then after that, when the Lord took away all the, as he says here, support, consolation, pleasure, abiding place, and so on. The second step causes the soul to seek God without ceasing. So what is the difference between this and that? What is the difference? Here it's a languishing love. It begins to climb. There is an absence of consolations at a certain point. That you can say, okay, that's the first stage. Fine, we can understand that. Now here he says, so we are in a way a little bit still inside of this purification. We haven't left it. We are not beyond it. We are still inside of the purification. So step one, step two for now are inside of book 2, which is this stage of purification. The second step causes the soul to seek God without ceasing, non-stop. Desire, which is not stopped but by other things. Wherefore, when the bride says that she sought him by night upon her bed, this is a quote from Song of Songs of Solomon, when she had swooned away according to the first step of love, so that's finished, she swooned away, and found him not. So you swooned everything, you leave out everything, you search for the Lord, and you haven't yet found the Lord. So the state here is difficult because you are between two stages, having left everything for him, but you haven't got him yet totally, or yet at all yet. I will arise and I will seek him whom my soul loveth. Song of Songs, chapter 3, verse 2. This, as we say, the soul does without ceasing. So it seems, and you see, I'm very prudent, it seems that this is what characterizes the second step, without ceasing. The yearning is there constantly, despite the fact that she hasn't found yet the groom. As David counsels it, saying, seek ye ever the face of God, and seek ye him in all things, tarrying not until ye find him. Until, you see, the without ceasing and until. This is me underlying, by the way. St. John of the Cross doesn't underline anything. So if you see any things in bold or whatever, this is editing that comes after. Original, I mean, from the editor, that you can find in an editor when a quote is in italic, it's not wrong, but he didn't do all that. He's just writing with his hand. So all this comes after, just for you to know. So the bold here is mine. The bold here is mine. So tarrying not until you find him, like the bride who, having inquired for him of the watchman during the night, passed on at once and left them. Yeah, this is a reference to Song of Songs of Solomon, chapter 3, 3 to 4. You can read that. It's interesting. Song of Songs is the heart of Carmelite life. It's the heart of mysticism and heart of Carmelite life. It's a poem, or also, by the way, in Hebrew. Mary Magdalene did not even notice the angels at the sepulchre. She didn't see it. Why? Because she's obsessed by him. She wants him and him only. And when he appeared in front of us, she didn't recognize him because she's so taken incessantly by him. I did want to say something, and then, like the bride who's having inquired of him, the watchman passed on at once and left them. Sorry, I just wanted to say something and I forgot. Anyway, it will come back. Okay, so yeah, you can read the Canticle of Canticles, the Song of Songs of Solomon, is considered to be a little bit the holy of the holies of the Bible. Like in the temple of Solomon, you have the holy, and then you have the holy of the holy where God dwells. So it is considered either by the Jewish tradition or by the Christian tradition as being the most sacred book. Of course, it has a lot of, how can I put it? It's a little bit dissuading in the sense that it looks as if it's a physical love, but in fact, the symbol is so strong. It's about this mystical love, and many masters in spiritual life, saints, doctors of the church, commented the Song of Songs. But as I said, in Carmel, it's fundamental. It's the core of Carmel, the book where you try to dwell usually. And also remember that St. John of the Cross commented it his way. And hopefully one day we will start this book, which is called A Spiritual Canticle, which is a little bit on the theme, working on the theme of the Song of Songs, the bride trying to find the groom. St. Teresa of Avila also tried to comment it then of course it was forbidden for women to deal with scripture, so she threw it in the fire, but thank God one of the nuns came and removed it from the fire. So we have bits of this offered by Saint Teresa of Avila. Now let us continue. On this step the soul now walks so anxiously that it seeks the beloved in all things. The accent here is on all things, in all things. So everything says or talks about Jesus, but Jesus who is absent. Nature tells the soul something about Jesus, the beauty of nature, the beauty of the trees, the mountains, the sea, and so forth. Everything talks about Jesus, reminds the bride about Jesus, but she wants him, not just traces of his presence. Okay? In daily life, the bride deals with people, but these people are Jesus' body. So in a way, the bride or the bride to be is surrounded by Jesus in everything. The people you meet are in fact Jesus' body. Any person you meet, nature is Jesus, tells the bride about Jesus, so everything talks about Jesus. On this step, the soul now walks so anxiously that it seeks the beloved in all things. In whatsoever it thinks at once of the beloved. Of whatsoever it speaks, in whatsoever matters present themselves, it is speaking and communing at once with the beloved. So in a way, it's like obsessive, if you want. When it eats, when it sleeps, when it watches, when it does whatsoever, all its care is about the beloved, as is said above with respect to the yearnings of love. In Spanish, todo su cuidado es en el amado. And now, as love begins to recover its health and find new strength, remember, the beginning is languishing. But now, there is a further step now, a new step inside of this love, this new love. There is greater strength, new strength. Before it was language, the bride was a bit languishing. Now the bride has greater strength. So as love begins to recover its health and find new strength in the love of this second step, it begins at once to mount to the third by means of a certain degree or step of new purgation or purification in the night, as we shall afterward describe, which produces in the soul the following effects. Now, again, remember this, you can only guess, and with prudence, where the person is by the effects, never by the cause itself or the source itself of what is happening. Why? Because it's happening deep inside. We don't have access to the place where God is working in us. The conscious soul doesn't have access to the spirit, if you want. So how can we know? It's by the effects of what God is doing in the conscious part. This also applies or for the spiritual director. It's through the effects that you can start to reasonably guess where the person is. The third step of the ladder, so now we are moving on to the third step of the ladder of love, is that which causes the soul to work, obrar, exercise of love, and gives it fervor so that it fails not. You might say fervor here, in Spanish it's calor, so it's not fervor, it's not fervor, it's calor. So be careful here. When it says fervor, it's just like impulse, if you want, or intensity, so that it fails not. It doesn't mean that you feel the fervor, but it means that you have the impulse to do things. Concerning this, the royal prophet being David, Psalms, says, Blessed is the man that feareth the Lord, for in his commandments he is eager to labor greatly. 111:1. Remember the counting, it's the church counting and not the Hebrew Bible counting. So sometimes there is a difference of one. In a Catholic Bible, you will see you have two numberings after a certain psalm. Wherefore, if fear, being the son of love, fear, you see, what is the seventh gift of the Holy Spirit is the filial fear of God. It's not the fear of a slave or of somebody who has a rough and tough, I don't know, boss. It's the fear of the son who doesn't want to offend his dad. So here, as you can see, he says here, the fear is the son of love, is the produce of true love, because I don't want to depart from God. That's the fear. It's not like the normal fear that we can experience. It's another type of fear. We need to be very careful here. Causes within him this eagerness to labor. It's like, I want to please, no? You see this desire in the person, no? I want to please God. I want to do something, and I feel that I'm not doing enough. You see, this eagerness to labor. What will be done by love? What will be done by love itself? So if fear causes this with eagerness to labor, what will be done by love itself? So if the son of love does this, imagine the love itself, what it does in the human being, the effect of the direct action of God's love in us, much more powerful than just when one of its fruits, the fear, what fear does. Okay. On this step, the soul considers great works undertaken for the beloved as small. The soul might do great things, courageous things, but at the same time, you ask the soul, or the soul questions herself and says, but I haven't done anything really. You see, it's very little. I would like to do more for the Lord. Many things the person considers as few. Many, the number, as few. And the long time for which it serves him as short. It's like, I just started yesterday to serve the Lord. It's like years and years, yes, but I feel that I haven't started yet. I just started yesterday. It went very quickly. I don't have the perception of that. Yeah. By reason of the fire. So what is giving us this perception that many are few and great works are small, etc.? It's love that is now burning in the person. So again, we don't have the direct access, but we see the effect of this love in us. So when the person considers this, it's an effect. It's an exterior fruit that sometimes we can perceive. Okay? Even so to Jacob, though after 7 years he had been made to serve, 7 more, they seemed few because of the greatness of his love. Genesis 29:20. Now, if the love of a mere creature, could accomplish so much in Jacob, what will love of the Creator be able to do when on this third step it takes possession of the soul? Hi, Rebecca. You see, so this is what he's saying, no? If this happens for just earthly things, imagine what you can see and witness in such in a soul under the love of the Creator. Here, for the great love which the soul bears to God, it suffers great pains and afflictions. So you see here, there is strength given to the person, perseverance, and not being aware even of all this. This is why it's only another person who can sometimes see the difference, not the person herself. As you can see, the person doesn't have this perception. This is why I said in the beginning, be careful, try not to measure yourself with this ruler. These 10 steps of the ladder looks like a ruler. Be careful, don't use that ruler immediately in a hasty way, because it's very difficult. We need to be careful and prudent here. So, and if it were lawful for it to be destroyed 1,000 times for him, it would be comforted. So if the person, lawful for it to be destroyed, si le fuese lícito deshacerse 1000 veces por él, it's like you kill yourself, as we say in English. No, I killed myself for that job, for that purpose, etc. No, if it was lawful to kill oneself, the person would do it 1,000 times. Teresa of Avila is very known to use this expression. No, I would give 1,000 lives for this, for one soul. No, to save one soul, I would give 1,000 lives. We have only one, but wherefore it considers itself useless in all. Useless in all. I'm not doing anything. I feel I haven't achieved anything. You see, this is why we need to be very careful. The perception that oneself, what we have of ourselves, is something, and the reality could be different. Consider itself useless in all that it does, and thinks itself to be living in vain. So this is not depression, by the way. Depression is something else, and but it looks as if it's depression. It has nothing to do with depression, of course. So discernment is paramount. Another wondrous effect. You see, we are talking about effects. Effecto admirable. Effects produced here in the soul is that it considers itself as being most certainly worse than all other souls. Most certainly worse than all other souls. Now, be careful. This is an effect of God's action in us. Don't try to force yourself to have these feelings and so forth. You can, how can I put it? Predispose yourself or prepare yourself or be available, but this is the effect of God's love and God's love and the growth of God's love in us. So be very careful. This is an effect of a supernatural or infused contemplation or grace or God communicating himself. These are all synonymous. Why the person will consider himself or herself worse than all other souls? First, because love is continually teaching it how much is due to God, or how much God merits or deserves, if you prefer. Porque le va el amor enseñando lo que merece Dios, what God deserves. Constantly, continually teaching this. So the person feels constantly that he or she is still never adequate to what God is expecting from him or from her. So this inadequacy is constantly there. Why? Because there is constant growth. It's an effect. It's of something happening and changing deep in us. And second, this was the first point. And second, why the person feels that he or she is worse than all the others? Because as the works which it here does for God are many, and it knows them all to be faulty and imperfect, they all bring it confusion and affliction, for it realizes in how lowly a manner it is working for God, who is so high. So remember, this new love or this new intervention of God is so powerful that it shows to us our nothingness. So we see it. It's not an intellectual thing. It's visible that everything that the soul is doing seems faulty and imperfect to the soul, to the person. And this creates confusion and affliction, because you want to please God. And this is the effect of God's love in us. You want to please God. You want to offer God something that is worth God himself, that could please him, and you have the impression that you can't offer him anything. You see? So this causes confusion and affliction, because the person, as an effect of this new intervention of God, the person can see the lowly manner, the base manner of his or her actions. So it's a constant insatisfaction. Whatever the person is trying to do, it's all failure. It's all failure. You see? And this is a result of God's action. You see? One has to be very careful in applying this. We don't play with this ruler, 10 degrees ruler. On this third step, the soul is very far from vainglory or presumption. Why? Because God is showing to the person its own nothingness. It's not an intellectual thing, it's just physically demonstrated. And from condemning others. So very far from condemning others and vainglory or presumptions. These anxious effects, again, we are judging from the effects, with many others like them, are produced by God's love, God's new intervention, extra step, new step in the person, are produced in the soul by this third step. Wherefore it gains, here's the paradox, it gains courage and strength from them in order to mount to the fourth step, which is that follows. You see? This is the paradox. God is giving new love. The person feels confusion and affliction, and paradoxically, the person is growing. But how can the person know that she is growing if confusion and affliction is growing? This is why we need to be careful not to judge ourselves, not evaluate ourselves, but let it, when it is the right time, be done by some people who know a little bit about that. The fourth step of this ladder of love is that whereby there is caused in the soul an habitual suffering because of the beloved, yet without weariness. There is a constant suffering, a normal constant suffering because of the beloved. The absence of the beloved, the desire for the beloved, there is a constant suffering, like insatisfaction, like I'm not complete, like I still want more. For as Saint Augustine says, love makes all things that are great, grievous and burdensome to be almost nothing. All the things that are great, grievous and burdensome, with love and because of love, they feel they are nothing, that they are nothing. It's nothing. Why? Because of this new strength given to the person. From this step, the bride was speaking. From this step, which means this fourth step, so about this fourth step, the bride in chapter 8, verse 6, is speaking, according to John of the Cross. Be careful. When desiring to attain to the last step, she said to the spouse, set me as a seal upon thy heart, as a seal upon thine arm. For love, that is the act and work of love, act and work of love, is strong as death, and emulation and importunity last as long as hell. It's a quote from toward the end, where it's the last chapter of the Song of Songs of Solomon. The spirit here has so much strength. The spirit, translation is correct. The spirit is gaining strength. Why? Because God is communicated to the spirit. The spirit is growing, being purified, being transformed, and acquiring step by step the likeness of God, which was lost. The spirit here has so much strength that it has subjected the flesh and takes as little account of it as does the tree of the tree of one of its leaves. So there is inner strength in the spirit transmitted to the soul, the conscious soul, and the soul treats the body as if the body didn't exist. while we need to be careful. And here also discernment and help from other persons is important, because otherwise we can damage the body, push the body to certain limits, which are not really proper. This is not proper spiritual life. Okay. So in no way does the soul here seek its own consolation or pleasure. You see how the strength is growing here. The person is not seeking consolation or pleasure, either in God or in aught else. Either in God, this is new, you remember, no? This is the left way, the way on the left, on the drawing of the ascent of Mount Carmel. We have the attraction, being attracted to earthly goods. The way to the left is that imperfect way, being attracted to the heavenly good, which are not God himself. And then we have this little path in the middle. So here he says, the soul here seeks its, in no way, the soul seeks its own consolation or pleasure. So this means that the soul is going through the narrow path of faith, hope, and love, and aiming toward God himself. So no spiritual goods, consolation and pleasure, or in no aught else, nor does it desire to seek or seek to pray to God for favors. The person is not asking for favors in the sense of consolation and pleasure, for it sees clearly that it has already received enough of these. So we're comparing the actual state with much previous state where God was giving milk and so forth. So now the soul doesn't want that, because the soul knows that this is not God himself. And all its anxiety is set upon the manner wherein it will be able to do something that is pleasing to God and to render him some service, such as he merits. And in return for what it has received from him, although it be greatly to its cost. So you see here, the person is not seeking consolation or pleasure, as you can see here, but the person is seeking to please God and to serve him, to render him some service, to give him, to serve him in something. You see, and there is no return on oneself, because consolation and pleasure, in fact, it's loving oneself in the name of God, loving oneself, which is not really the right thing. Okay, so it's interesting here to see that God's work in the human being is now directing the person properly. The person is not inclined in any way toward consolation and pleasure. The person finds its own sort of pleasure or joy in the absence of pleasure and joy. Let me repeat that. The soul finds its pleasure and joy in the absence of pleasure and joy. That's new. Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus repeats that. She said, my joy is not to find, my consolation is no consolation. And my consolation means it is consoling me not to have consolations. And I'm here because I want to please him. I'm not here for myself. When I go and practice contemplative prayer, for instance, prayer of the heart, I'm doing it not to please myself. I want to be here for him, and I want to please him. Now, if I get aridity, if I get distractions, if I get what I get, that's fine. But I'm not here for myself, for what I will feel, what I will get. I'm here to give, not to receive, you see. But this is the effect of God's work. So that's interesting here. God is strengthening the person from within, and directing it and giving it the right direction and the correct, I would say, quote unquote, consolation, in the sense that that's not what I want. What I want is to serve him, is to please him. You see? So you are here dealing with a person who is already in a completely different league, a new and different league, and that's good. That's very good. That's the right path. Okay. The soul says in its heart and spirit. So this is like a prayer. And as Father Louis Guillet used to say, when you spot a saint praying, you are reaching the finest, the deepest point of this saint. So, of course, it's not directly his prayer, but he is praying. He's showing us a form of prayer, or what the soul could say at this moment. Ah, my God and Lord, how many are there that go to seek in thee their own consolation and pleasure, and desire thee to grant them favors and gifts? How many? Plenty. Cuán muchos? Plenty. But those who long to do thee pleasure and to give thee something at their cost, setting their own interests last, are very few. You see? So connect, oh my God and Lord, as a beginning, and connect it with the last, la chute, as we say in French, no, the end of the statement. They are very few. They are very few. It is, I remember in the life of St. John of the Cross, apparently during recreation, St. John of the Cross was with his brothers, and they were moving a bunch of little pebbles from one place to the other, so creating like how do you say mukyo? How do you say that? Like say again, a pile. Yes, thank you. A pile of pebbles, and they were left just a few, very few pebbles on the other side. And he quoted the gospel, pauci. Pauci means a little. The number is very small about the people who know, who really know God, more than what you think. He said. So this is transmitted by witnesses who saw him. So you had the pile of pebbles on one side and little, just a few pebbles on the other side. And he said, and he stopped there and stared at this sort of parable, if you want, and said, yes, how few they are, very few, more than what you think, fewer than the few. So let us go back. So this is something that he has, he notices from, he's a priest, he serves people, so he can guess. The failure, my God, is not in thy unwillingness to grant us new favors. God is not unwilling to grant us new favors. On the contrary, God's desire, burning desire, yearning desire is to give himself and to give us new favors. But in our neglect to use those that we have received in thy service alone, in order to constrain thee to grant them to us continually. So the failing resides in the fact that we are not using the one we already received in your service. We received, you want to give us more, but the one we receive, why we are not receiving more? Because the ones we received, we are not using them in your service. So this is interesting here. So what is the fruit? What is the at which effect we receive graces is to use them and serve him. Why do we receive the love of God, the charity of God, is to serve him. So if we are not using what he gave us, it sort of stops the flow. You see? Sometimes it does happen, no, in our spiritual life, we are not in tune with God's will. So we want just more and more graces, and we forget that we already received, but we are not using them. So he says, why would I give you more if what you have, you're not even using it in my service, in thy service alone? Notice, please, the alone here, the weight of the alone. because we serve other things, we serve other people, other causes. But are we really aiming toward this purity in service? You see, that's the point here in this word alone, and you have it in Spanish, no? Solo, en tu servicio, in order to constrain thee to grant them to us continually. So we can entice, we can almost force God to give us more if we are using what he gave us. This is why incarnation of the grace is important. Sometimes we receive the grace, but we don't use it. You see, it's like a lectio. You're understood, but you haven't put it into practice. And then you want the following lectio to work, while in fact, you haven't used what was given to you. So why do you want more? It will not work if you're not putting it to practice. Huh? Why you say, Lord, Lord, and you don't put into practice what I say? But if you put into practice what I say, I am like pushed almost to give you more. And this is what St. John of the Cross says in the spiritual canticle. And I will finish with that. In the spiritual canticle, and I think it's, I will need to find it, in stanza 10, if I'm not wrong, toward the end of it, he says that there is a way almost to push God to give us his grace. That's incredible when you think about it, that the human being, by acting in a certain way, he or she can almost force or push or entice God to give himself more. How? He says by practicing charity. And then he quotes St. Paul, first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13. Love is this, love is patient, love embraces all, believes in all, hopes in all, and so forth. You can read it again. Okay, so this is really incredible, because it's who tells you that you can almost force God to give himself more to you. I'm trying to find the passage. Just give me a second. I might find it. Okay, I will. So the passage I'm alluding to, this is in the actual complete works. Of course, this is Canticle B, but you still have it. It's stanza 13, paragraph 12. Here it's page 524, and of course in the Canticle A, it's stanza 12 in Alison Pierre's works, and it's in toward the end of it, which is paragraph 11. So I'm reading it from here. It is worthy of note. So I'm talking about something, in fact, very deep, which is trying to understand how God works, how God functions. And this is what he's saying in the text here. We are reading in Dark Night. Is it possible to sort of force God, so to speak, to give himself to us more? John of the Cross and some other saints underline this fact as a truth. And this is a secret. I'm very much inclined to say, let us be careful, my dear friends. This is a secret about God himself, to know how God functions. So let me read the text. So 524, paragraph 12, the second part. It is worthy of note that God does not place his grace and love in the soul except according to its desire and love. So God doesn't give himself to us just out of his own decision, but he says it's according to its desire and love. So something depends on us. So it doesn't depend on God. God would like to give himself, but there are things that depend on us. So let us continue and see what he's trying to say. Those who truly love God and we will see what it means, who truly love God, must strive not to fail in this love, for they will thereby induce God. Like you are forcing God almost. Is it possible to have control over God? John of the Cross, a great saint, and not only him, others also, seem to say that yes, we have, quote unquote, of course it's a human way to speak, that we have control over God. So they will thereby induce God, if we may so express it. He's aware that he's using a strong word. We do not induce God usually in Catholic theology of the grace. We consider that the grace is given freely by God. You cannot force God, you cannot induce God. But here he says he's aware of what he's saying, that he's crossing almost, he's not, but to the common understanding of the theology of grace, he's crossing a red line. So this is where he says, if we may so express it. So they will thereby induce God to further love them. And to love is to give oneself. So you can induce God to love you more. It's like competition, if you want. It's like God cannot be won in generosity and in this type of competition. So if you love more, he will give more. To further love them and find delight in them. How can we please God? How can we allow him to find or make it happen, no? That he finds in us a delight? It's by exercising this love. And to acquire this charity, one ought to practice what St. Paul taught. Charity is patient. This is the quote, first of Corinthians, chapter 13. Charity is patient, is kind, is not envious, does no evil, does not become proud, it is not ambitious, seeks not its own, does not become disturbed. All this is quote of St. Paul. Thinks no evil, rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in truth, suffers all things that are to be suffered. This is him adding this. Believes in all things that must be believed, hopes all things, and endures all things that are in accord with charity. And here ends stanza 13. Now, just to confirm for you in the Spanish, he says, induce God, in Spanish is moverá más. Si así se puede decir. Moverá más. We're moving God. We are provoking him, if you want, to give himself more. You see? So it's by giving ourselves that we are almost pushing him to give himself more than he was giving himself before. Okay? Any questions here regarding this point? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you.